everyone. So welcome to How Do I guest starring Judge Bunny. I'm Toby. You may or may not know me. For those that don't, I'm a circuit judge, or at least I was until the pandemic. Now I'm just unemployed. But before I became unemployed, I was doing large events for about 2 years. In this presentation, I'm just going to share some of the stuff that's come up and some of the stuff that I've learned. Often I get asked a lot, how do you make money on the MagicFest circuit? And the short answer to this question is you don't. You just don't make money here. I'm really poor. So, but you can sustain yourself on the MagicFest circuit. For the first half of this presentation, that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to go over the process of preparing for your first MagicFest in terms of travel and accommodations, what the options are in terms of most cost-effective versus most comfortable. And for the second half, I'll be giving an overview you might actually find yourself doing at a MagicFest. Notably, I won't be covering any operations or scorekeeping stuff because, well, this was for a judge conference, so I only have an hour, and I didn't make any pictures of bunnies working officer scorekeeping, but I've made a lot of other bunnies, so you just get what you get, okay? So let's assume you've been accepted to your first MagicFest. Great, somehow you impressed somebody with something, and now you got a job. So the first place to start planning your MagicFest adventure is to figure out how you're going to get there. It's really like you won't be walking or swimming unless you have a hometown MagicFest, in which case, lucky you have a hometown MagicFest. Some of us, we get one once every 3 years, and then they decide they don't want to do it anymore because they don't like working in Canada. Anyway, I'm not salty. It doesn't matter. Most likely, you'll be flying, in which case I advise you set up a flight tracker as soon as you get accepted so you can keep an eye on the prices. Usually prices only go up about 1 to 2 weeks before the flight date, but from day to day they can fluctuate up to $100 in either direction. So it's $240 today, it's $340 tomorrow, it's $140 the day after. You want to make sure you're booking on obviously the $140 day and not the $340 day. Okay? And when you look at the tracker, that's going to tell you, give you a really good idea after a week or so of what the average price is and what you should be paying. The other option for largely Northeast judges is driving, either alone or with other people. The big thing about this is that while plane tickets are expensive, so is gas. So when you're doing your calculations, especially if you're like renting a car, make sure you also account for gas. 7 hours of gas is not negligible. And sometimes with gas and the car rental, it actually becomes more expensive than flying, so it wasn't worth it to drive. And you had to drive for 7 hours, which sucked. Also keep in mind that Google's estimated time for any drive longer than 2 hours is really optimistic. Once I had a 16-hour drive, or Google said it would be 16 hours. I was in that car for 27 hours, 27 grueling hours, and it really sucked. So make sure you give yourself maybe a buffer day when you're driving, especially if it's going to be more than 10 hours, okay? Because maybe you want to stop and you want to sleep and you want to eat and you want to do things other than just drive at the limit that Google thinks you're going to drive at, okay? So presumably you've planned travel, but you might have noticed that your phone has been buzzing nonstop since you got accepted. This is largely because you received about 6 emails from CFB, here's some shirts, except we don't have shirts, and also fill out this survey, also fill out this other survey, also congratulations for getting accepted if you didn't notice from the other 5 emails. But this is also because the Judge Apps forums are now being flooded with posts, and you might be like, oh, maybe these posts, they're not useful, okay? It's just people trying to trade boxes and talking about whether North Market is value or not. As a pro tip, if you're ever in Columbia, North Market is value. Just go to North Market for food every day. You really can't do any better, okay? Good thing is you can disable these Judge Apps notifications. Bad news is I have no idea if this is true for Judge Academy since I've never actually worked an event that was organized through Judge Academy because, COVID-19 and everybody's got the plague. So the next major hurdle in event planning is where you're going to sleep while you're there. No, you can't sleep at the hall. You can't sleep under the main event stage. You can't sleep under the chairs or in a vendor booth. You're going to get kicked out. It's going to be bad news bears for everybody, okay? The major methods of resting are either a hotel, a hostel, a motel, or an Airbnb. First thing I'm going to talk about is hotel rooms, okay? So if you rent one of these all by yourself, it's completely unsustainable. You're paying $1 million every night, and while that is really comfortable and really nice, you're really not going to make any money. So what everybody usually does is we get a staff hotel, and then you cram as many judges as you can cram into one room as humanly possible. This is usually 5. If you're really ambitious, you can stick 6 people in. That's 2 people per bed. There's 2 beds, and then there's 2 people on the ground. So you might have noticed that you got 2 people to a bed. If you're not comfortable sharing a bed with a near stranger, you may want to mention this to your roommates, but you probably have to pay for 2 people slots, okay? because, we're all trying to save money here. The other thing to keep in mind is because it's a two-person hotel room for only 2 people, you might only get 2 room keys. Sometimes you can ask the desk for more, and sometimes they'll give you more, and that's great, but sometimes they'll give you more and deactivate the 2 previous ones you had, so you still only have 2 working room keys. Also, if you don't snore, make sure your roommates don't either, and if you do snore, please tell your roommates beforehand so everyone knows what they're getting into and so that they can get out of it if they actually want to get sleep during the event. Okay? The other thing you might need to be aware of is that people can cancel last minute, so your price per person for the room might actually go up if somebody's travel plans collapse, okay? But otherwise, if that doesn't happen, the Judge Hotel is actually pretty sweet if you don't mind staying with like 4 or 5 other people. As for everything else, for my first 10 or so events, I kind of hoofed it alone, so I rated these in terms of cleanliness, security, price, and location. So we talked about hotels. Obviously, this price thing goes way up if you split with other people, but it's like absolute trash if you don't. Hostels is the second one here. They're really similar to Airbnbs, but a little more expensive and with more people. I've had okay experiences with them, but make sure you either bring a lock or plan to bring your valuables to the venue every day. And if you bring your stuff with you to the venue, I gotta tell you, the judge room is not secured and it's not supervised. So you're just putting your bag in a pile of other bags and kind of counting on herd immunity to like protect them all, that if somebody comes in, hopefully they don't steal your bag, they just steal another bag, okay? Or hopefully, ideally no bags are stolen, which is generally what happens. That's why we put our bags there. If they got stolen, we wouldn't keep putting our bags there. We're not stupid. Motels are fine, but you gotta be careful, okay? You gotta look at reviews. You gotta really be aware of the area that the motel is in, because if you get a motel in a dumpy area, it's gonna be a dumpy motel. In general, these are okay, but I've also had a motel in Arizona where my AC doesn't work, and that was an extremely miserable experience. So you got to be careful. Airbnbs are generally pretty good because it's somebody's house. People generally take good care of their houses, okay? Obviously, there are a couple nightmare experiences I've had where, I can't get into my room, or my roommates are super loud, or whatever. But on average, I found them to typically be the best value, the most clean, and pretty secure. You're generally only in there with, the family or a couple other tenants. So my trophy of approval goes to the Airbnbs. They've been clean, secure, quiet, and as far as I know, nobody I've Airbnb'd with has been an axe murderer or convicted felon or anything, so I'm still alive and still in all one piece. So now you picked a place. How are you getting to the venue? Well, there's a couple options. There's public transit, a rental vehicle, or ride sharing. And as I mentioned before, if you're in the staff hotel, you actually get a freebie on this one because you can just walk to the venue. Sometimes it's even attached, so you just go over a sky bridge. You don't even have to interact with the outside, which is really nice if it's snowing or something. So again, I've rated these in terms of cleanliness, speed, and price. So here we go. I've used a lot of public transit in my life. It's not super clean, but if the public transit is close enough to wherever you're staying, you kind of can't beat it for price. It's usually like $2 tops. The most important thing you want to remember here is you usually want to plan 2 bus spans in advance. So if for whatever reason the first bus doesn't arrive, you miss it, it comes early or late, the second bus should still get you to work on time because you don't want to be late. That makes you look dopey, okay? Next option is a rental vehicle or your own vehicle if you brought it. Now, if this was your method of actually getting to the event, this seems like a really good idea until you think about large cities and the fact that parking is usually about $10 a day, sometimes more, especially on Friday because it's a work day, okay? So make sure you take that into your calculations. Sometimes the price is not as amiable as you think it'll be. Also, you have to pay for gas, and if you're driving an hour a day, that really sucks. I've done that. It's not great. Also, if the people in your room, if you got 2 people in an Airbnb and I'm working early shift and the other guy's working late shift and then we got to go in, I got to go in 4 or 5 hours early because we only have 1 vehicle. So make sure you take this into account when you're doing the 1 vehicle thing, okay? Ride sharing is generally pretty good, but give yourself a little more time than Uber or Lyft tells you because sometimes your guy just goes and does donuts in a parking lot for 5 minutes and cancels your ride and you got to get a new driver. But still, even with the donuts, I still give ride sharing my personal trophy of approval. It's been pretty decent. The cars have been clean and they generally get me there on time. And if you're splitting with another person, the price is super solid. So you got into the city, you have a room, and somehow you made it to the building that the Grand Prix is in. or the MagicFest is in. This is kind of an old presentation, so sometimes I say Grand Prix. I mean, the Grand Prix is also still in there, but you know what I mean, okay? The first thing you have to do is find which hall within the venue that the MagicFest is in. Make sure to budget time for this before your shift. Sometimes it takes 5 to 10 minutes to meander around this hall, and there's often a couple events going on. We're usually sharing with, like, you know, teenage dance competitions. So when you're going through the hall, you'll usually see groups of people, and you'll usually see a group of people with backpacks and all going in one direction, and then you'll see a bunch of 14-year-olds in spandex. You want to follow the people with the backpacks, not the people with the spandex, unless you actually want to attend a dance competition. I heard some of the music. It's pretty hoppin'. Maybe you'd rather do that instead, you know? So at this point, once you get to the MagicFest, the first thing you want to do is locate your team lead. At this point, you probably realize you don't know anything about your team lead because you never worked an event before. That's totally fine. That's really normal. If you plan ahead, you can check them out on Judge apps, and they might have a picture so you know what their face looks like. Or you can check them out on Judge Academy, and maybe they uploaded a picture, and maybe pictures are working. I don't know. They were having some trouble with pictures, but maybe they're working now. If you're like me or Bunny and you don't really like to plan ahead, or you don't like to cyberstalk people, a really good way to find people in MagicFest is to go up to random people and say, hey, have you seen this person? And eventually they'll turn to you and you'll be like, I am that person. And they'll look at you really weirdly because, like, it's just a weird thing to be asked where yourself is. And congratulations, you look kind of like an idiot to your team lead. But that's okay because you found your team lead and all the hard work is done. Because you can ask them any question and they're basically an unending fount of information and they can just tell you whatever needs to do. So thank you for listening. That's all I needed to tell you. Well, you know, that's what I'd like to say, but that was really only 10 minutes. And I haven't really talked about anything you couldn't have Googled yet. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the tracker. I'm not fooling anyone. I'm not really sure why the joke is still in here. It's not even that great of a joke, but we're here now. And you know what? You're stuck with me. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is when you first walk into the hall, you'll see these giant 20-foot flags. Each is for a different type of event. There's a black one for scheduled sides, a blue one for main event or PTQ, and there's a red one for on-demand events. There's also this green one for customer service or whatever. That one doesn't really move, okay? But you'll see these big flags. And you might be wondering to yourself, why is this color scheme Grixis? And that's because after our first few events, we all participate in a blood ritual, pledging subservience and secrecy to CFB, which is secretly run by Nicol Bolas. Or at least, I guess it's not really a secret anymore because this is now on the internet. It's not just being presented at judge conferences. Anyway, let's talk about ODEs, or on-demand events. Like you probably guessed, because you know you have a brain and can think, these are launched when enough people become interested in them. But how is this organized? Well, that's what I'm going to tell you right now. So you're probably going to be, how it works is you're standing by the reg desk, you're just talking to a person that's keeping track of ODEs, right? And the player's going to come up and he's going to hurl some money at them and demand to be placed in a draft. He's going to be like, I want to play World Wake, or whatever it is he wants to play, okay? They might also not do this money hurling thing. This is pretty old-fashioned. And honestly, it's kind of rude because then you have to pick them up all off the... Anyway, so nowadays, we got these registration kiosks where you actually just beep some boops into a bunch of little tablets, and usually you just wave your plastic in front of the tablet, and it sucks all your money out. Or you can wave the papers in front of the tablet, and somebody will come get them. They got this new thing going on. It's really exciting. So after some kind of plastic or financial thing exchanged, the person at the desk will give this player the buzzer, and then the player can walk away and buy singles or whatever. Now, if you're like me, and the first thing you probably thought of is, wait, can't players just take the buzzers and can't they just like steal them? They can just leave. You just gave a player a buzzer and he can just leave. And like, yeah. This is true. For the price of a draft and by forfeiting any future events with CFB, you can just steal buzzers. But, like, why would you do that? The buzzers don't even work outside the hall. And half the time they don't even work inside the hall. So anyway, what exactly is a buzzer for if not for stealing? Well, just like most things in Magic, reading the buzzer explains the buzzer. And just like most things in Magic, you need to explain this to the players. When 8 buzzers have been given out of the registration desk, the person working registration is going to beep some boops, which will cause all the buzzers to do literally the only thing they can do, which is buzz. And I found this really cool jiggle animation, and this is great. This is amazing. You are watching the pinnacle of technology. Anyways, so inevitably, what they're going to do is they're going to walk over to the gathering point, and you're going to end up with 7 players and 7 buzzing buzzers for your 8-person draft. And you're going to be like, well, I'm missing a kitty. So you're going to go over to Reg, and you're going to ask them to boop the buzzers again, just in case that kitty missed the buzzing. After a minute or two, if the kitty doesn't show up, you might need to explore some other options. One of these options is calling a player's name over the mic. You need to make sure this is okay with CFBE first. If they're doing a called draft on like day 2, it's going to be really obnoxious if like the draft caller is like, all right, everybody open your second pack, and you're just like, hey, I need player kitty for draft. It's really, really rude. So make sure you ask them. If it's Friday, it's probably fine. If it's Saturday or Sunday, they might give you the no. And something you might say is, kitty, your draft is about to fire. This is terrible for multiple reasons. First off, everything that's not a bunny in this presentation is a kitty, and you only said their first name, so a million kitties are just going to swarm the red gathering point, even if they didn't sign up for a draft. The second thing is you said fire on the mic. This is really bad, okay? Because half the people aren't going to hear the first part. They're just going to be like, they're going to hear you say fire, and they're going to be like, oh my God, everything's on fire, and they're going to start evacuating. This is how people get trampled. So don't do that, okay? Instead, something better to say is, attention, this is a player announcement for Player Kitty. Your 8-man draft is about to launch. Once again, if you are Player Kitty, please report to the red gathering point. Your 8-person draft is about to launch. I usually say a couple different things when I do my announcements, mostly because if I repeat the same thing, people might get bored and stop listening. Also, because I realized I said the first time I said it, a bunch of stuff was wrong. And so I want to fix it the second time I say it. It's great. So anyway, somewhere or another you managed to assemble a holy octuple octagon. You got 8 people for your draft. So now that you got them all, you grab product. And I'm not going to tell you how to grab product because this is pretty public. So, I don't want players knowing how to get the product. Talk to your team lead. What you need to do is you need to take out your phone and not check Facebook. You need to go to cfbe.ode.com and you find your draft in here, okay? And you click on it. And it's going to have all your player names. And what you want to do is you want to quickly do a roll call to make sure that these are the correct 8 players, because sometimes players for multiple drafts all glore them up at once. Also, if somebody signed up for Modern Master and you're running a Korea, they're going to be real disappointed if they go through the rigmarole of being sat down and then you give them a wrong packs, okay? So make sure you do a roll call so you got the right 8 players. Now in the on-demand area, instead of individual table numbers, we got these little 8 people clumps of chairs, and they're all assigned a letter. It's going to be like A1, A2, A3, whatever. You want to go into the software and see what tables are open. And it's going to look like this. These gray ones here, these are open. These colored in ones, those are full. This one that's half, that means half draft bracket is done. We'll talk more about draft brackets in a minute. So go in the software, see where it's empty, and then go physically over to the area and look with your eyeballs, because sometimes there's a clerical error, somebody didn't enter their thing, whatever. You just want to make sure that physically when you go to seat these players, there aren't going to already be players there. That would be really embarrassing. So you bring them over to the area. The really cool thing about the ODE software is it sets up your matches and your seating. So it'll tell you exactly where to seat your players and what their matches are going to be. I do this by pointing, so I'm like, hey, you sit there, you sit there, you sit there. You have to repeat this because, sometimes they stop listening, they get bored. They don't have packs, so they're bored. You also want to make sure, the other thing you want to do here is you just tell them all the regular judge stuff. So you're like, hey, you're playing big X, little x. I always tell them to give their first round opponent a friendly wave, because this way, if anybody doesn't know who they're playing, they just need to figure out who's waving at them, and then they'll figure it out. You're also just like, don't look at each other's picks. Don't text your friends. Don't text LSV for draft advice. Honestly, he's not even that good at drafting, so like, why? So you do all that. There's 2 really important things you want to tell them about that are not normal judge things, and that's that it's single elimination. Inevitably, somebody won't have known this. They're going to be sad, but it's better to front load the sadness now, and also this way they can feel really pressured in their first game, because they know that if they lose, they don't get to play any more games. You also need to tell them to call a judge to report results. That's because all reporting is done in the little phone software I just showed you, right? Remember the phone software from the previous slide. And you might be wondering, why do we use this special software instead of Word? Well, if you're asking yourself or others this question, you never used Word, okay? There's a reason we don't use it. There's a reason it's in the garbage. Now, by this point, you're probably thinking, gee, it sure seems like I need a phone and a data plan to be able to work ODEs. And personally, you should probably have a phone and a data plan when you're working an event for like many reasons, texting your team lead, texting your friends, posting secret judge stuff on Facebook. Don't do that. Don't post secret judge stuff on Facebook. You should have it, but you don't actually need it for ODs. If you don't have this, well, CFB has these giant tablets that they can just lend out, okay? The problem is these things require 3 arms to wield, and they weigh about 100 kilograms or 100 pounds for those of you that are in a country that still thinks it's the 1700s. And you might be going, whoa, wait a minute, 100 kilos and 100 pounds are not the same, and you're correct. I didn't do this conversion when I wrote this script, so it's wrong. I don't know why I just read it out, but we're here now, so we're going to move on. Anyway, so these things are really big. They're really heavy. It makes it really hard to hold pack wrappers. Like if you're holding a bunch of crap, like you're going to be like, I'm holding a tablet, and then I got pack wrappers, and then I picked up some draft chaff, and then a player gave me buzzers, and you're just like, oh, I'm holding all the things. So that's the downside of the tablet. However, the upside of the tablet is that players don't often realize that any judge in the area can take a result. They only think that the judges with tablets can. I've been in this position where I walk by a table and players are just happily playing, and then somebody with a tablet walks by a table and they're like, oh, judge, we've been waiting forever for somebody to report our match result. And I'm just like, what was, but I was just, So, they have that going for them. So, maybe the visibility isn't such a bad thing. There's another type of event that kind of goes through the software that's much more low maintenance, and that's commander pods. Now, how these work is 4 players will sign up at on-demands, and then we just throw them somewhere in ODE land. Usually at the end of every row, there's like 4 table, like a 4-person clump of chairs. We can't put a draft there because it's only 4, so we kind of relegate these to commander. We just throw a commander pod there. We mark it in the software. We give them their prizes right at the beginning. We're just like, here's all your prizes. Winner takes this. And then we just we walk away. They're autonomous at that point. The only maintenance we really need to do is we sometimes need to cycle around and just see if they're actually still playing there. And if they are, we can't put a new commander pod there. But these things are pretty autonomous. So that's most of ODEs. But you might have noticed there's something else in the ODE area. There's this weird thing called Turbo Town. And you and players might have questions like, what is Turbo Town? Why can't I trade cards here? Why is it in my way? Who's the mayor? And these are easily answered by me right now. That's what I'm going to do. Turbo Town is like an on-demand constructed event. In this picture, I got these little triangles, but nowadays we have these larger flaggy things. They're about 10 feet tall, so they're pretty visible, and players will definitely have questions about them. How it works is you go up to registration, you buy a Turbo Town voucher, and then you trundle over the Turbo Town area, and you find a sign for the format that you want to play, and you sit down there. And eventually, another player will trundle by, and they'll lock eyes with you, noticing that you're in the area that they also want to play in, and they'll look at you and they'll say, hey, it's time to play Legacy. At which point, they'll call a judge, we'll come over, we'll take their vouchers, and we'll tell them to play a match of Magic and throw some prize ticks at them. The actual amount of ticks you're going to give them is going to vary by MagicFest. I think the last one I did, you gave them like 40 for the winner and 20 for the loser. I'll talk more about what the heck a tick is later in the presentation, but for now, just know that it helps you get fabulous prizes at the prize pool. So now we're done with on-demand events. So if it's your first or second MagicFest, you'll pretty likely be on scheduled sides if you're not on ops. They usually put like your first or second time to give you ops just so you're not just like a million things flying at your face all at once. But sometimes they give you scheduled sides, which is also pretty swell. Running scheduled sides is actually pretty easy. I think it's I honestly think it's a little better place to introduce new judges than ops because it's the most like running a normal Magic event. If you ever run a normal Magic event before, you kind of know what you're doing with scheduled sides. To help you out, there's a Kickstart team. This is really different than Kickstarter. Kickstarter is for funding personal music or game design projects, and the Kickstart team is for actually running and starting magic events. So usually it's a team of 2 or 3 or 7 or whatever people that basically do or help you do all the pre-event stuff for whatever you're running. About 10 minutes before your event starts, you need to just check in with them and make sure that everything's ready to go. Your product, your promos, they'll probably tell you which scorekeeper is yours, where your pairings board is, your starting table number, all sorts of good stuff. And basically your job is just to interface with them and make sure that all the starting event stuff gets done. This also includes your announcement. This also includes moving your flag. And you're like, wait, didn't you say those flags were like 20 feet tall? What do you mean moving them? I mean moving them. So these giant flags, okay? On demands, the flag doesn't move. Registration, the flag doesn't move. Scheduled sides and PTQ, flags move, okay? That's because the events are in different spots all around the room starting at different times. So, in on-demands, gathering 8 people up at a flag and then walking them 20 feet, not a big deal. You're probably not going to lose a person. Scheduled sides, you got a 300-player modern event. You don't want to gather them all up on one end of the hall and then have to walk them 5-10 minutes to the other end of the hall. You're going to lose 10 of them. Half of them are going to go and decide to sell singles instead. A bunch of them aren't going to be able to hear you telling them to follow you. It's going to be a mess. So what happens is before the event starts, you go over the flag and you pick it up and you put it right by your starting table number, right beside your pairings board where you're going to post the pairings. And when you make your announcement for your event, you're going to be like, hey, 3 p.m. modern, blue gathering point. Move your little kitty butts over there, and hopefully they move their kitty butts over there. Important things to note about this flag, okay? In this picture, Bunny's carrying it freaking wrong. If you carry it like this, the pole unseats from the base, and you fall over because the whole thing unbalances. And it's really embarrassing. If you drop this on yourself, super embarrassing. If you drop this on players, it's a lawsuit. So after you launch your event, all you have to do is time rounds and be in your area. Kickstarter's not going to help you flip your rounds and cut slips and pairings for round 2, so you're in charge of that. But just be around, answer questions, moderate time extensions at the end of the round, and tell players where to drop off their match slips. As a note, players drop off their slips at the red side event stage in America, but in Europe, they usually drop them off in a box taped to the pairings board. If your event's really far from the stage, we might also do this in America or Canada, but usually we just tell them to, move their little kitty tails over the side event stage and give the scorekeeper their slip. Sometime during round 3, players are going to start asking you about prize ticks. Remember when I talked about prize ticks and I said we talk more about them? Well, we're talking more about them now. Now is the prize tick time. All CFB regular RL events are only 3 rounds long, except Commander, which is 2 rounds long and has a bunch of strange rules going on with it. So even if your modern event has 400 people, you're still going to have 3 rounds. And the standard protocol is that for the last round, instead of taking the prize or their match slip over to the scorekeeper like they've been doing every other round, they take their match slip, they take their opponent, and they take themselves, and they go over to Prize Tick Station. And Prize Tick Station will give them ticks. Okay? However, there's a newish policy that came up, and that's if I'm 2-0 and it's the top of round 3, if I'm 2-0, so I just won my second match, or I said I just won my second match. Instead of playing round 3, I can take my 2-0 slip over to the Prize Tick Station and say, hey, I'd like to intentionally draw round 3. And what happens is they say, yeah, that's totally fine. They make me draw round 3, so they drop me from the tournament, they give me ticks, I go away, I enroll in another event, I give more money to CFB. This is very good. I'm also really happy because I don't have to ask my opponent if they want to ID and get shot down. Or like they feel really uncomfortable, I feel really uncomfortable, everybody's uncomfortable. So this is a really great system. Make sure you tell them this at the top of round 2 when you're running your event. Otherwise, they're going to be salty they didn't know about it. But you're probably wondering, well, what the heck is a prize tick? What is due? How do I use it? The important thing to mention is that it has no cash value, okay? But it's worth about $2.50. And they're affiliated with the appropriately named prize wall. Prize ticks are effectively like Chuck E. Cheese tokens of MagicFests. You spend them at the prize wall to get cool things like standard packs, old standard packs, actual cool things like uncut sheets and big cards, which I didn't make graphics for because it's hard. The most important thing to remember is that if you see anyone selling prize sticks in the venue, that's really bad. But if you see people trading prize sticks, that's adorable and they're totally allowed to do it. That's about it for scheduled sides. But finally, the last thing we need to do is dress the elephant token in the room. Or, well, I guess the Grand Prix. So, a long time ago, the entire Magic Fest was called a Grand Prix, but nowadays it's just what the main event is called. Grand Prix is this really big honking 15-round event that lasts 2 days. The awards invites to the Pro Tour, which is Mythic Championship or the Players Tour, I don't know, whatever they're calling it today. They keep changing the name, but it's the PT. If you're working the main event, you're going to be on a specific team for the event, okay? So you're either going to be on deck checks, product, slips, pairings, end around, or floor and features. And each of these teams is dedicated to addressing one part of the event. At the beginning of the day, you'll have a meeting with the team, and you'll be like, we're going to be doing this one thing, and we're only doing this one thing all day. And you're probably wondering why we have an entire team dedicated to these random individual tasks like slips. You're like, well, I've run my local PTQ. I can hand out slips all by myself. Why do I need 4 other people to do this? And you know what? You're not wrong. At your normal PTQ, you hand out 40 or 50 slips, and that's fine. But, if you have a Grand Prix and you got 3,000 slips, I like to see you try to get those all out before 10 minutes into the round. So instead of this catastrophe, we're just going to give a bunch to everybody. They're going to get them out throughout the room. That way the players have the slips really quickly. If anyone wants to ID, which is more relevant in the later rounds, they can do that and go get dinner and stuff, okay? So the first thing, I'm just going to quickly go over all of the different teams, and I'm going to tell you kind of what you'll be doing if you're on that team. So the first thing is the product and swag team. GP isn't a GP if there's no swag, and if it's limited or Canadian, there's also a bunch of packs you need to throw at the players, and the product team is going to help organize this. Everyone on the product team is kind of like a little mini manager for everyone else on staff at the beginning of the event, because basically everyone on staff is going to be doing product stuff at the beginning of the day, because deck checks doesn't have any decks to check if players haven't started playing yet and haven't handed in their deck lists. Okay, so they're going to give you a logistical plan, and everyone's going to help execute that logistical plan to shove packs or whatever it needs to be shoved into the hands of the players before the event starts in a really timely and efficient fashion. Next thing that happens at a GP is pairings. Pairings team is going to take care of this. Now, again, like slips, you're probably like, oh, this doesn't really sound like a job. It's a job, okay? You're still thinking small tournament, think big tournament, okay? You don't have 1 pairings board. You don't have 2 pairings boards. You probably have at least 11 pairings boards. And you want all these pairings to go up simultaneously. You don't want, Zachariah Zonko to have to wait longer than Avon Aberdeen to get his pairings. You want everyone to have an equal opportunity to get their pairings at the same time, so you hand pairings to each member of your team. They gorm them on the boards roughly simultaneously. Also, nowadays, we also have the pairings online, pairings.channelfireball.com or my.cfbevents.com if it's a PTQ. It's a PTQ, you go to my.cfb, you click on your event, you'll see your pairings on the internet. It's great. I'm really excited about this new system. It cuts down congestion. It makes tournaments faster. Next up is the deck check team. This has actually changed quite a bit recently. Currently, all deck lists for GPs are online, so all you need to do to conduct a deck check is you need to take the players' decks. You probably take their match slip just so you have their names and stuff, and you just need to take it to the back. You look up the player's name on the tablet, and boom, deck list in your face, easy peasy. However, we can't use this system for anything that doesn't have online deck lists, so I'm going to quickly go over the index method, just because it's a really useful method, especially if you're working a PTQ, okay? So for constructed, at the beginning of round 1, you're going to have all the players write their table number in the top right corner of their deck list, okay? So they all write down their little number. And then you have your judges collect the list in table number order. One judge is going to do this wrong. That's fine. Just fix it. Once you have them, get the round 1 pairings by table number. And check to make sure you have all the lists. So you can just go through and you're like, boop, 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 and you go down the list and make sure that everybody actually gave you a list and you're not missing any and you didn't lose any. Then you get the pairings for round 1 by player name. So you're going to have them organized alphabetically instead of numerically, okay? And you're going to post both these, you're going to post this players by name in the back. Okay, this is going to be important. And what you're going to do is when you take their decks, you're going to go to the back and you're going to be like, okay, I took Coffee Crisp's deck. And you look on the like players by name and you're like, oh, that's number 1. He's going to be the first on the pile. Okay? That's how you index. That's how you avoid having to organize these numerically. For limited, the process is the same, except you have to organize the deck list after collection since you get them just randomly throughout the limited build period. Theoretically, you could organize these by last name, but it is a little bit easier to organize by number than last name. Just alphabetizing is just generally more challenging. Actually checking the decks is basically what you've done before. When you've checked decks, you just make sure all the cards are there. Go to a deck check workshop for that. That's not what I'm doing. I'm giving you the Cliff's Notes. Now, throughout the day, you'll be doing your things, slips or papers or whatever, but you're probably going to take some judge calls. You probably should take some judge calls, and you might need to issue time extensions and possibly infractions. An event as large as a GP, scorekeeper kind of wants all the time extensions and infractions to be formatted in the same way, okay? So if you have an infraction, you put a little W in that box there, okay? And you put any time extensions up in the top right corner like I done there, okay? And you want to be using red pen. Red pen's really important because otherwise players can just issue their own time extensions, and then, it's just chaos and anarchy because everybody has an extra 10 minutes, especially the blue-white control players, and you're really confused. This is sort of the structure that most scorekeepers want. Obviously, talk to your team lead before the event starts, just in case it changes, especially once events start again. We might be using different software. They might want a different format, but this is the most current information I have for you, okay? So you got the table number. Then you got the player number. So you got P1, P2. You got the player that committed the infraction, P1. It's going to be their last name, then their first name. Then your judge name, okay? You want to put your name on it. It's your infraction. You got to own it. Then it's the category of infraction, the subcategory, and the penalty, okay? These are all really important. And then finally, you want a little description of what happened, okay? So just in case you issue an infraction for something janky and weird, and the head judge needs to know about it, or you issued a warning where you shouldn't have, you need this little description. It needs to be decent, okay? Not like insane, but decent. So you're going to take a bunch of rulings. You're probably going to issue some infractions. Let's say a player is unhappy. Sometimes they're going to look at you funny, or they're going to be like, I don't think that's right. Or they might say, hey, can you just double check that? And this is totally fine, okay? As long as they're not super rude, it's totally fine. What they're basically trying to tell you is, I would like to appeal your ruling. And what the appeal is, so if a player is unhappy with your ruling at a local event, too bad, so sad, you're the only judge there. You just sort of look at them straight in the eyes and you say, I am the law. But in this case, don't do that. Not only is that really obnoxious and scary, but there's also a process. And it's the appeals process. So if they start looking concerned, go get a head judge. Say, hey, I'm just going to escalate this because you seem concerned. And you talk to the head judge. Every head judge is going to have a different kind of procedure, but pretty much all across the board, they all want the first words out of your mouth when approaching them to be, I have an appeal, and they're generally okay with you just completely interrupting them for this. After that, you explain the ruling to them, and then they'll probably either you walk and talk about it, or they'll come over, you stop and talk about it. But they're going to come with you because they probably want to look at the board, and they definitely want to talk to the players, okay? Even if they're just saying the same thing that you just said, the player will be a little ameliorated if it comes out of another person's mouth. If you get appealed again, don't feel bad. It's not because you're wrong. It might be because you're wrong, but it might just because the player wants to roll the die and get another judge, or, the player has no idea what's going on, or the player just might be a salty boy. Either way, appeals are fine. They happen. Whatever. Just go get another judge, okay? It makes the players happy, and it's not your problem anymore. So if you do get appealed, you might have to issue a lengthy time extension, and you're going to have to input this into Purple Fox. And you're probably wondering why I've mentioned Purple Fox, and the presentation is clearly about pink bunnies, so let me elaborate. Purple Fox is the current software that larger events use for end-of-round procedures. When you first go to the URL on the screen, you'll be given the option to select a tournament. Afterwards, you'll be brought to the screen that I'm showing here. The screen easily allows you to enter time extensions. You just boop that button there. A little window comes up. It says, what's your table number? You put in the table number, and then it's like, how long do you want to give them? And you just put something that's hopefully less than 20 minutes. At about So sometimes the hall, let me see. Yeah. So you enter your time extensions. Sometimes the hall is organized into zones. Like right below this time thing, it's going to be like, let me check out the zones. You can select a zone and you'll be brought to this screen, okay? Because it's very large, we don't have all the tables up here on this screen. That's why it's subdivided into zones. But each square here represents a table number, and you can see that the time extensions are affiliated with the table numbers. So about 15 or 10 or whatever minutes left in the round, you might notice some of the squares changing colors. Okay? If you're on the UR team, you're probably doing it. And if you're not on the UR team and you're doing it, you should stop. And if you're not on the UR team and it's just happening, you'll just see it happening, and that's totally fine. And the colors change simply by clicking on them. Green means that the slip is in and the players are gone and the table is taken care of. Yellow means that the table is being currently watched by a judge. So for whatever reason, sometimes there's a name attached to these. You can input judge names on tables. And finally, red means that we have no idea what's going on. The players are definitely still there and they're still playing, but we don't have a judge on it. If you're not on the EOR team, you're going to report to somebody at about 5 minutes left in the round who is on the EOR team, and they're going to assign you to a table. So they're going to be like, hey, can you go sit on table 10? And what you're going to do is you're going to just sit on table 10 until they're done. And just make sure that if they have a time extension, they adhere to the time extension, be there to quickly answer any judge questions so they don't generate a time extension, and pick up the slip when it's done and bring it to the front so that it's in as soon as it can possibly be in. Finally, the last team I want to talk about is the floor and features team. In my opinion, this is probably the most boring and both nerve-wracking job, both at the same time. Because if you make a mistake, the entire internet will see you do it. So be very, very careful not to make a mistake. But you're really only watching 4 matches, so it's kind of likely that you're probably just not going to take any calls for the whole round. Also, currently, whether the match is streamed or not, like at the most recent few Grand Prix, online streaming of physical matches is kind of abolished, so you might not even make a mistake in front of the whole internet. You might just be in like this little roped off VIP area. So it's basically just extremely quiet and chill. If you're not in the feature match area, you're part of the floor team. And what you're doing on the floor is ensuring that all the areas of the hall are sufficiently staffed with judges. So you notice an area where there's like one judge for like 100 kiddies. That's pretty bad. You probably want to go poke some judges that are talking about a corner case up by the stage and say, hey, I know you're really excited about this corner case, but can you go, like at least one of you, help out in the back of the room where there's like 20 judge calls and no judges. And then they'll go and do that, okay? So you made it through the event, but you realize that you're tired and you're thirsty. That's because you forgot to drink water and take breaks. Make sure you take breaks and drink water. This is really important because, you don't want to suck at the end of the day. Also, if you didn't turn off forum notifications like I told you to, you might notice that there's a judge party. Seriously, go to the judge party, even if you don't like the judge party. I used to skip judge parties because, I'm not like that social, but there is free food. So if you're on the value train, it's a free meal. And some of the judge parties have been seriously awesome. One of the ones, like the last one I think in MF Reno, was at an arcade where we just got to play video games all night. And that was freaking amazing. So that's all I have to say, okay? So that was my presentation on MagicFests. I don't know if we're ever going to get MagicFests back. I don't know if they're going to be the same if they do come back. But a lot of people asked me to post my presentations on YouTube, so I did. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a YouTube comment. You can also PM me on Facebook. I'm pretty responsive. You can send me an email and I'll probably answer. If you tweet at me, I have a Twitter, but I just don't check it. So, I'm glad you sat through the entire presentation. Hopefully you learned something, and, we'll see you around in the future.